The colony of New Haven was a quiet place. Green fields stretched for miles under a pale blue sky. Farmers worked the land. Children played in schoolyards. Families lived simple lives, far from the busy cities of Earth. It was the year 2347, and humanity had spread across the stars. They had joined the Galactic Concord, an alliance of over 40 alien species. Humans were newcomers to this vast universe, but they had earned their place through hard work and peaceful trade. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge of her patrol vessel, the Steadfast. She was a woman of 45 years, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired lines around her eyes. 20 years in the United Earth Navy had taught her many things. She knew how to fight. She knew how to protect. But mostly, she knew that space was dangerous and that peace was fragile. Her ship was on routine patrol near New Haven when the distress signal came through. The message was broken and full of static. A woman's voice screamed for help. Then there was gunfire, then silence. Bennett ordered her helmsman to move at maximum speed. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had a bad feeling about this, a very bad feeling. The Vecthari had been watching human space for months. They were an insectoid species with hard shells and sharp claws. Their compound eyes saw the universe as a place of hunters and prey. They had built their empire by conquering weaker species. Now they looked at humanity and saw soft creatures who did not deserve their worlds. The Vecthari raiding party arrived at the settlement of Millbrook just after dawn. Their ships descended from the clouds like black insects. The colonists had no warning. There was no time to run. The attackers moved with cold purpose. They ignored the adults who tried to fight back. They walked past the farmers with their simple weapons. Instead, they went straight for the primary school and the orphanage at the edge of town. The Vecthari believed that attacking children would break the human spirit. They thought it would make humanity afraid. They thought wrong. When the Steadfast arrived, the Vecthari ships were already gone. Captain Bennett led her crew down to the surface. What they found would haunt them forever. The school was destroyed. Walls had been torn apart. Small desks lay scattered across the ground. And there were bodies. 47 children lay dead in the ruins. Some had tried to hide. Some had tried to run. None had escaped. Bennett knelt beside a small boy no older than 6. His eyes were still open. She reached out with a trembling hand and closed them gently. Around her, hardened soldiers wept openly. Some punched walls in rage. Others simply stood in silence, unable to process what they were seeing. But that was not the worst of it. 63 children were missing. The Vecthari had taken them alive. Dr. Nathan Cole arrived with the medical team. He was the chief xenobiologist on New Haven, a quiet man who spent his days studying alien plants and animals. Now he stood in the ruins of a school and documented the aftermath of a massacre. His hands shook as he worked. Governor Patricia Vance came to see the site herself. She was a strong woman who had led this colony for 15 years. She had faced droughts, crop failures, and disease outbreaks, but nothing had prepared her for this. She stood among the bodies of children she had watched grow up, and felt something break inside her. The Vecthari sent a message across open channels. They broadcast footage of the attack for all the galaxy to see. A Vecthari commander appeared on screen with his clicking mandibles and cold eyes. He spoke in the common galactic language. This is what happens to those who stand in our way. Humans are weak. Humans are prey. Submit now, or watch your offspring suffer. The message was meant to frighten humanity. It was meant to make them surrender. Instead, it united them in a way nothing else could have. On Earth, billions watched the broadcast. Mothers held their children close. Fathers clenched their fists in anger. Old soldiers who had hoped for peace felt the fire of war ignite in their hearts once more. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. The debate was short. Captain Bennett personally transmitted all the evidence to Earth Command. Every body, every wound, every piece of footage recovered from security cameras. She included her own report, written with cold fury. They targeted children, she wrote. Not as collateral damage, not by accident. They hunted them deliberately. They took survivors for unknown purposes. The Vekthari have declared what kind of war this will be. We must answer in kind. The Galactic Concord held a meeting to discuss the incident. Ambassadors from dozens of species gathered in the Great Chamber on the neutral world of Fessin Prime. They expressed sympathy. They offered condolences. They passed a resolution condemning the attack. But they did nothing. The Concord had a strict policy of non-interference in bilateral conflicts. If humanity wanted justice, they would have to take it themselves. Several species privately warned the humans not to act rashly. The Vekthari were powerful, they said. War would be costly. Better to negotiate. Better to accept losses and move on. Humanity listened to this advice. Then they ignored it completely. Admiral Christopher Hayes received his orders from the United Earth Council. He was an old man with white hair and a face carved from stone. He had fought in 3 wars and hoped never to fight another. But when he read the orders, he felt no hesitation. Only grim determination. The orders were simple. 2 objectives. No restrictions. First, recover the captured children, alive, if possible. Second, make the Vekthari pay a price so terrible that no species would ever consider harming human children again. Hayes looked out the window of his office at the fleet yards orbiting Mars. Hundreds of ships floated in the darkness. Thousands more would join them soon. Every colony, every station, every outpost was sending what they could. He thought about his own grandchildren back on Earth. He thought about the 47 small bodies lying in the morgue on New Haven. He thought about the 63 children somewhere in Vekthari space, alone and afraid. Then he picked up his communicator and gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. All commands, this is Admiral Hayes. Begin mobilization for Operation Reckoning. We will bring our children home. And we will teach the universe why humanity should never be tested. Not like this. Not ever. Across human space, ships began to move. Engines roared to life. Weapon systems activated. Soldiers said goodbye to their families and reported for duty. The Vekthari had wanted to break humanity with fear. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that protected its young with the fury of ancient predators. A species that would burn worlds for its children. 3 weeks passed since the Millbrook massacre. In that short time, humanity transformed itself. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels and cargo haulers switched to military production. Factory worlds increased their output by 300%. Men and women who had never held weapons volunteered by the millions. The galaxy watched in disbelief. They had seen young species go to war before. Usually there was chaos, disorganization, and fear. But humanity moved with terrifying efficiency. It was as if a sleeping giant had opened its eyes, and what it saw had made it very, very angry. Commander Daniel Shaw sat in a dark room surrounded by holographic displays. He was the head of human intelligence operations, a thin man with sharp eyes who never seemed to sleep. His job was to find the captured children before the main fleet attacked. Every hour mattered. Every minute could mean another child lost. His agents had spread across neutral space, gathering information from traders, smugglers, and sympathetic aliens. The Vekthari thought their territory was secure. They were wrong. Human spies had been watching them for years, just in case. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A Relari merchant ship had passed through Vekthari space on a trade mission. The Relari were an ancient species, who observed but rarely interfered. However, one of their crew members had seen something that troubled him deeply. He passed the information to a human contact. The children were being held on Korthax 7, a military research station in the outer territories of Ekthari space. Shaw's blood ran cold when he read the full report. The Vekthari were using the children for experiments. They wanted to understand human biology, human pain responses, human psychology. They saw the children not as people, but as test subjects. Shaw immediately sent the intelligence to Admiral Hayes. The Admiral read it once, then read it again. His hands gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. "Prepare a rescue team," he ordered. "Our best people. No expense spared. Those children come home." Dr. Elaine Morton was summoned to brief the military leadership on Vekthari psychology. She was an expert who had studied the species for 20 years. She understood how they thought, how they made decisions, how their society functioned. She stood before a room full of admirals and generals, her voice calm and clinical. "The Vekthari are a hive species," she explained. "They have a central hive council on their homeworld, Vekthar Prime. Queen mothers make all major decisions. Individual Vekthari have limited independence. They follow orders without question." She paused, letting that sink in. The attack on Millbrook was not the action of rogue soldiers. It was authorized at the highest levels. The Queen Mothers believed that targeting children would shatter human morale. In their society, young are expendable. They produce thousands of offspring and expect most to die. They cannot understand why we would care so much about a few dozen children. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "What happens if we destroy their military but leave the Hive Council intact?" Morton shook her head. "They will rebuild. They will attack again. The Queen Mothers who ordered this will see our restraint as weakness. To them, mercy is the same as fear." The message was clear. This war could not end with half measures. On the diplomatic front, Ambassador George Coleman addressed the Galactic Concord one final time. He was a large man with a booming voice, and he used it well. "We came to you in peace," he said to the assembled species. "We joined your concord. We followed your rules. We asked only to live among you as equals." He looked around the chamber at the alien faces watching him. 47 of our children are dead. 63 more are being tortured as we speak. We asked for your help. You gave us words, resolutions, sympathy." His voice hardened. "We do not want your sympathy. We do not need your resolutions. What we need is for you to stay out of our way. Any species that interferes with our response will be considered an enemy. Any species that shelters the Vekthari will share their fate." The chamber was silent. No one had ever spoken to the Concord this way. But no one moved to stop him either. Many of the species present had their own reasons to fear the Vekthari. Some had lost worlds to them. Others had paid tribute for centuries. Secretly, many hoped humanity would succeed where they had failed. The Rilari Observer, an ancient being whose species had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, simply recorded Coleman's words without comment. He had seen this pattern before. Young species could be pushed only so far before they pushed back. Humanity had reached that point. Lieutenant Maria Santos sat in the cockpit of her fighter, running system checks for the 100th time. She was 28 years old, with short black hair and her mother's brown eyes. She had joined the Navy to explore the stars. Now she was preparing for war. Her younger sister, Rosa, had been among the children killed at Millbrook. She was 8 years old. She liked to draw pictures and dream about becoming a pilot like Maria. Now she was gone, buried in the soil of New Haven, along with 46 other children who would never grow up. Maria did not cry anymore. She had used up all her tears in the first week. What remained was something colder and harder. A focus that frightened even her commanding officers. She had volunteered for the Advanced Strike Force. the dangerous missions that would clear the path for the main fleet. Her squadron leader had asked if she was sure. She had looked him in the eye and asked a simple question. If it was your sister, would you sit this out? He never asked again. Admiral Hayes stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Constellation. Before him floated the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 400 warships, 12 dreadnoughts, thousands of fighters and support craft. Crews from every human colony had answered the call. He had not slept more than a few hours in weeks. The weight of command pressed down on him constantly. He would be sending young men and women to their deaths. Some of those ships would not come home. He knew this, and he accepted it. But he also knew something else. Those 63 children were waiting for rescue. Every day that passed meant more suffering for them. Every hour of delay was an hour of pain. The rescue team would launch first, slipping through enemy lines while the fleet drew Vekthari attention. It was a desperate plan with 1,000 ways to go wrong, but it was the only plan they had. Hayes looked at the stars beyond the fleet. Somewhere out there, the Vekthari were preparing their defenses. They still believed they could win. They still thought humanity was weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot heard his voice. This is Admiral Hayes. In 2 days, we begin Operation Reckoning. Some of you have family among the captured. Some of you lost family in the massacre. All of you carry the weight of what was done to our children. He paused, letting his words settle. We did not start this war. We did not want this war. But we will end it. We will bring our children home. And we will make certain that no species in this galaxy ever forgets the price of harming human young. Prepare yourselves. We move in 48 hours. The fleet acknowledged his orders. Engines hummed with power. Weapons systems came online. 400 ships turned toward Vekthari space. The storm was coming. The stealth ship Shadow moved through space like a whisper. No lights, no engine glow, nothing that could give away its position to enemy sensors. Inside, 12 soldiers sat in darkness, checking their weapons and waiting for the signal to move. Sergeant Kevin Brooks was their leader. He was a large man with a scarred face and hands that had done hard work all his life. He had served in the military for 15 years. He had fought pirates, rescued hostages, and walked into situations where death seemed certain. But this mission felt different. This one mattered more than anything he had ever done. Beside him sat Corporal Angela Price, the team medic. She was a small woman with steady hands and calm eyes. She carried enough medical supplies to treat a dozen wounded soldiers. She prayed she would not need all of it. Private Raymond Torres was the demolitions expert. He was young, only 22, but he knew explosives better than anyone in the fleet. His job was to make sure Korthak 7 never hurt another child after they left. The station appeared on their screens as a dark shape against the stars. It was a massive structure, built for research and defense. Vekthari ships patrolled around it in regular patterns. Security was tight. The Vekthari knew the children were valuable hostages. But they did not know humanity had found them. The Shadow slipped past the patrol ships with careful timing. Its pilot was the best in the fleet, a quiet woman named Lieutenant Carol Nash. She had practiced this approach 100 times in simulation. Now she did it for real, her fingers dancing across the controls with perfect precision. They docked at an abandoned maintenance port on the station's lower section. The hatch opened with a soft hiss. Brooks led his team inside. The corridors of Korthak 7 were dimly lit with strange blue lights. The air smelled wrong, too dry and filled with chemicals that made human lungs burn. The team moved in formation, weapons ready. communicating through hand signals rather than words. They encountered their first guards at a junction point. 2 Vekthari soldiers, standing watch, their compound eyes scanning the corridor. Brooks raised his hand, signaling his team to stop. Then he pointed at 2 of his best shooters. The shots were silent, modified weapons designed for exactly this kind of work. Both guards fell, without making a sound. The team stepped over the bodies and continued forward. The intelligence had been accurate. The children were held in the research wing, 3 levels up. Brooks led his team through service tunnels and maintenance shafts, avoiding the main corridors where more guards patrolled. They found the laboratory complex behind a heavy security door. Torres worked on the lock, while the others kept watch. 30 seconds later, the door slid open. What they found inside would stay with them forever. The children were held in small cells with transparent walls. Each cell contained a single bed, a toilet, and nothing else. Medical equipment surrounded some of the cells, machines that measured pain responses and biological reactions. Some children lay still, too weak to move. Others pressed their hands against the walls, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Brooks felt rage boil up inside him, hot and terrible. He wanted to burn this place to ashes. He wanted to find every Vekthari scientist and make them pay. But he was a professional. He had a mission to complete first. "Corporal Price, start assessing the children," he ordered quietly. "Torres, find the reactor core and prepare your charges. Everyone else, secure the perimeter. We are getting these kids out." Price moved to the first cell and opened it. Inside was a girl of about 10, thin and pale from weeks of captivity. She flinched when Price approached, then realized this strange figure was human. "Are you here to save us?" the girl whispered. Price nodded, fighting back tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we are taking you home." One by one, they opened the cells. 63 children, ranging from 5 to 12 years old. Some could walk on their own, others had to be carried. All of them showed signs of trauma, both physical and emotional. The youngest was a 5-year-old girl named Sophie. She had not spoken since her capture. Her eyes were empty, staring at nothing. When Price lifted her gently, Sophie did not react at all. She simply hung limp in the medic's arms, like a broken doll. Price had seen many terrible things in her career. This was the worst. Torres returned from the reactor core, his face grim. "Charges are set. 15 minutes after we leave, this whole station goes up. Nothing will survive." Brooks nodded. "Good, let us move." Getting out was harder than getting in. The children slowed them down. Some cried, despite efforts to keep them quiet. The youngest ones did not understand what was happening and had to be calmed constantly. They were halfway to the docking port when the alarm started. Red lights flashed throughout the station. Vekthari voices echoed through speakers, clicking and hissing in their native language. Someone had discovered the empty cells. "Move faster," Brooks ordered. "Torres, take point. Price, stay with the children. Everyone else, cover our rear." The first Vekthari security team found them in the service corridor. 6 soldiers with plasma weapons, their mandibles clicking with anticipation. They expected to find escaped prisoners, frightened and weak. Instead, they found human soldiers. Brooks and his team opened fire without hesitation. The Vekthari shields absorbed the first shots, but could not handle the sustained assault. One by one, they fell. But the gunfire would bring more enemies quickly. "Run!" Brooks shouted. They ran. Children screamed. Soldiers fired backward while moving forward. The corridor seemed to stretch forever, each second lasting an eternity. More Vekthari appeared ahead of them. Torres threw a grenade that cleared the path in a burst of fire and smoke. They kept moving, stepping over bodies, trying not to let the children see the violence around them. The docking port came into view. Lieutenant Nash had the Shadow powered up and ready. The rear hatch was open, waiting for them. "Get the children aboard first," Brooks ordered. His team formed a defensive line, while Price and two others helped the children onto the ship. Small feet pounded up the ramp. Crying voices echoed in the docking bay. Weapons fire filled the air as more Vekthari arrived. Private Torres took a hit to his shoulder. He stumbled, but kept firing. Another soldier fell, shot through the leg. Brooks grabbed him and dragged him toward the ship while still shooting with one hand. The last child was aboard. The wounded soldiers were pulled in. Brooks was the final one up the ramp, firing until the hatch closed behind him. "Go, go, go," he shouted. Nash pushed the engines to maximum. The Shadow tore away from Korthak 7, breaking through a patrol ship that tried to block their path. Vekthari fighters scrambled to pursue, but Nash was faster. She knew this ship like she knew her own body. Behind them, the timer reached 0. Korthak 7 exploded. The reactor overload created a fireball that consumed the entire station. Research labs, experiment records, everything was vaporized in an instant. No scientist survived. Torres looked out the rear viewport at the expanding cloud of debris. His shoulder was bleeding badly, but he smiled. "Good riddance," he said quietly. In the cargo hold, Price moved among the children, checking injuries and offering comfort. Most would recover physically. The emotional scars would take longer to heal. Sophie sat in a corner, still silent, still staring at nothing. Price wrapped a blanket around her small shoulders and held her close. "You are safe now," she whispered. "No one will hurt you again, I promise." Brooks sent a single transmission to the main fleet on a secure channel. 3 words that carried more weight than entire speeches. "Package secured. Proceed." Somewhere in space, Admiral Hayes received the message. He closed his eyes and allowed himself one moment of relief. Now the real work could begin. He opened the fleet channel and spoke the words his soldiers had been waiting to hear. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. The rescue team has succeeded. Our children are coming home. Now it is our turn. Target all Vekthari military assets. Show no mercy. Make them remember this day forever." 400 ships surged forward into enemy space. The rescue was complete. The reckoning had begun. The human fleet crossed into Vekthari space like a blade cutting through flesh. There were no warnings sent ahead, no demands for surrender, no diplomatic messages. Only a single broadcast repeated on all frequencies in every language known to the galaxy. "You touched our children." The Vekthari had prepared their defenses. They had assembled a massive fleet at the border, confident in their superior numbers. High Drone Commander Xiktath commanded these forces personally. He was a veteran of many wars against weaker species. He had never lost a battle. He studied the human formation on his tactical display. 400 ships arranged in a strange pattern he did not recognize. Their dreadnoughts held the center, while smaller vessels spread out on the flanks. It was not a formation used by any other species in the Concord. "They outnumber us only slightly," Xiktath told his officers. "Their technology is inferior to ours. Their species is young and inexperienced. This will be a simple victory." He gave the order to attack. What followed was anything but simple. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula lasted 6 hours. Historians would later study it for centuries, trying to understand how humanity achieved such a devastating victory against a larger force. The answer was fury. Human ships fought with a ferocity that shocked the Vekthari. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not hesitate when outnumbered. Captains rammed their crippled vessels into enemy formations rather than surrender. Pilots flew suicide missions to protect their comrades. Every human soldier fought as if the 47 dead children of Millbrook were watching them. Captain Laura Bennett commanded the dreadnought Retribution from its armored bridge. Her ship led a flanking maneuver that caught the Vekthari completely off guard. While the main human force engaged the enemy head-on, Bennett's group swept around to strike from behind. The Vekthari formation shattered. Ships that had been focused on the frontal assault suddenly found themselves taking fire from both directions. Their communications broke down into chaos. Commanders gave conflicting orders. Panic spread through their ranks. Lieutenant Maria Santos flew her fighter into the heart of the Vekthari fleet. Her squadron targeted enemy command ships, cutting off the head of the snake. She thought of her sister Rosa with every trigger pull. She did not feel satisfaction when enemy ships exploded. She felt nothing at all except the cold focus of revenge. By the 4th hour, the Vekthari were in full retreat. By the 6th hour, 2/3 of their fleet was debris floating in space. High Drone Commander Ziktath escaped on a damaged cruiser, racing back toward Vekthar Prime to warn his superiors. The humans were faster. Admiral Hayes did not pause to celebrate the victory. He ordered his fleet to advance immediately, chasing the retreating enemy before they could regroup. Human ships swept through Vekthari space like a wildfire, destroying everything military in their path. Orbital defense platforms were reduced to rubble. Shipyards that had built Vekthari warships for centuries were bombarded until nothing remained. Supply depots, communication stations, weapons factories, all of them burned. The humans were systematic and thorough. They did not stop until every military target in each system was eliminated. At each planet, Admiral Hayes offered the same choice: surrender unconditionally or face complete destruction of military capabilities. Most Vekthari commanders refused, still believing their species would ultimately triumph. They were wrong. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Species that had feared the Vekthari for thousands of years saw them crumble in weeks. The great insectoid empire that had conquered dozens of worlds was being dismantled by a species barely 2 centuries into spaceflight. The Galactic Concord held emergency sessions to discuss intervention. Some species argued that humanity had gone too far. Others pointed out that the Vekthari had started this war with an unforgivable act. The debates continued, but no action was taken. The Relari Observer recorded everything. His species had witnessed the rise and fall of hundreds of civilizations. They had seen young species burn brightly and fade away. But this was different. "We have seen many aggressive species before," he noted in his records. "Conquerors who swept across the stars with fire and blood. But humanity is something we did not expect. They do not fight for territory. They do not fight for resources. They fight for their young. This makes them more dangerous than any empire we have observed." He paused his recording and stared at the tactical display, showing human fleet movements. The Vekthari made a critical error. They assumed humanity was like other young species, frightened and easily broken. Instead, they awakened something ancient in the human spirit, something that remembers every wound and never forgives those who harm the innocent. High Drone Commander Ziktath reached Vekthar Prime with his damaged ship and terrible news. The Hive Council listened to his report with growing alarm. Their military had been shattered. Their outer colonies had fallen. The human fleet was advancing steadily toward their homeworld. Queen Mother Vexila, supreme leader of the council, demanded to know how this had happened. How had a young species defeated their ancient warriors? How had prey turned into predators? Ziktath had no answers. He only knew what he had seen. Human ships that refused to die. Human soldiers who fought with impossible determination. A species that seemed to grow stronger with every loss rather than weaker. Vexilla ordered every remaining ship to defend Vekthar Prime. They stripped colonies of their defenses. They called back patrols from distant systems. Every resource was focused on protecting the homeworld. But even as she gave these orders, Vexilla understood a terrible truth. The Vekthari had ruled this region of space for 5,000 years. They had conquered species stronger than themselves through cunning and cruelty. They had always found a way to win. This time was different. This time, they had chosen the wrong enemy. Messages began arriving from across the Vekthari Empire. Colony worlds were surrendering to human forces rather than face destruction. Military commanders were abandoning their posts and fleeing to neutral space. The empire was collapsing from within. Eaten away by fear and despair, Vexilla crushed one of the message devices in her clawed hand. She had ruled for 2 centuries. She had never known defeat. The very concept was foreign to her mind. She addressed the Hive Council with as much authority as she could summon. "We will not surrender," she declared. "We will not bow to these soft creatures. They may have won battles, but they cannot conquer Vekthar Prime. Our world has stood for 50,000 years. It will stand forever." The other Queen Mothers clicked their mandibles in agreement. They had no other choice. Surrender meant the end of everything they had built. At least fighting offered a chance, however small, of survival. Outside the council chamber, the sky of Vekthar Prime was clear and calm. The citizens went about their daily lives, unaware of how quickly their world was about to change. Children played in the streets. Workers tended to their tasks. Life continued as it always had. But on the edge of the solar system, something was coming. 400 human warships, battered but unbroken, emerged from hyperspace. They arranged themselves in a formation that surrounded the planet on all sides. Admiral Hayes looked at the Vekthari homeworld on his display. A blue and green planet, not unlike Earth. Millions of civilians lived down there, most of whom had nothing to do with the attack on human children. He thought about what he was about to do. He thought about the weight of command, the burden of choosing who would live and who would die. For a moment, doubt flickered in his heart. Then he remembered the footage from Millbrook. Small bodies lying in the ruins of a school. Soldiers weeping over children they could not save. His doubt vanished. "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. "It is time to end this." The final confrontation was about to begin. The human fleet surrounded Vekthar Prime like a ring of steel. Below them, the Vekthari homeworld turned slowly, its surface dotted with cities and military installations. Billions of lives waited for humanity's judgment. Admiral Christopher Hayes stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Constellation. He had not slept properly in weeks. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain. He was about to decide the fate of an entire species. Dr. Nathan Cole stood beside him. The xenobiologist had joined the fleet to serve as a witness. He had seen the aftermath of Millbrook. He had documented the bodies of murdered children. Now he watched as humanity prepared to deliver its response. "Admiral," Cole said quietly, "what happens next?" Hayes did not answer immediately. He studied the planet below, thinking about all the choices that had led to this moment. The Vekthari attack on innocent children, the desperate rescue mission, the battles that had destroyed the Vekthari military. Everything had been building toward this final confrontation. "That depends on them," Hayes finally said. "I will give them one last chance. What they do with it is their choice." He activated the communication system. His voice broadcast across the planet, and throughout the Vekthari fleet still defending their world. "This is Admiral Christopher Hayes of the United Earth Navy. I am addressing the Vekthari Hive Council and all citizens of Vekthar Prime." He paused, letting his words reach every corner of the planet. "Your military has been destroyed. Your colonies have fallen. Your empire is gone. You have nothing left except this world and the people on it. In the Hive Council chamber, Queen Mother Vexilla listened with fury burning in her compound eyes. Around her, the other Queen Mothers shifted nervously. They had never been addressed this way by any species. The insult was unimaginable. Hayes continued, "You attacked our colony of New Haven. You murdered 47 children. You kidnapped 63 more, and subjected them to horrific experiments. You did this because you believed humans were weak. You believed we would submit to terror." His voice hardened. "You were wrong." Vexilla rose from her throne. She refused to show fear before her council, even as human ships filled the sky above her world. "We will never surrender to prey," she declared. "We will fight to the last Vecthari. Our species will not bow before lesser creatures." Hayes heard her response through the open channel. He had expected defiance. The Vecthari Queen Mothers had ruled through cruelty for too long. They did not know any other way. "I am not asking for your surrender," Hayes replied. "I am offering a choice to your people." He changed the frequency of his broadcast, directing it toward the general population rather than the leadership. "Citizens of Vecthar Prime, hear me. Your Queen Mothers ordered the attack on human children. They authorized the murder and torture of innocents. They believed this would make us afraid. Instead, it has brought destruction to your world." Across the planet, Vecthari civilians gathered around communication screens. They listened to the alien voice speaking in their language. Many had never heard a human speak before. "We do not wish to destroy your species," Hayes continued. "We are not murderers of civilians even now. But we demand justice. The Queen Mothers who ordered this atrocity must face consequences. If you deliver them to us, if you accept responsibility and make peace, your civilian population will be spared." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "But if your leaders choose to continue fighting, if they force us to take your world by force, we will show no mercy. Every military target will be destroyed. Your planet will burn. Your species will end. This is not a threat. It is a promise." Silence fell across Vecthar Prime. Billions of insects processed what they had heard. For thousands of years, they had followed the Hive Council without question. The Queen Mothers had always known best. Their decisions were never challenged. But now those decisions had brought ruin. The Empire was gone, the military was shattered, and the choice was simple: follow the Queen Mothers into extinction, or choose survival. Vexilla sensed the shift in her people's mood. She felt their doubts spreading like a disease through the hive mind. For the first time in her long life, she experienced fear. "This changes nothing," she announced to her council. "We will not negotiate with—" She never finished the sentence. The doors of the council chamber burst open. Vecthari soldiers poured in, but they were not defending the Queen Mothers. They were arresting them. Behind the soldiers came civilian workers, scientists, administrators, ordinary Vecthari who had decided they wanted to live. "What is the meaning of this?" Vexilla shrieked. "We are your queens, you cannot—" A soldier struck her across the face, silencing her. "You led us to destruction," he said simply. "We choose survival." Within hours, the Hive Council was overthrown. Vexilla and the other Queen Mothers, who had authorized the attack on human children, were placed in restraints. A new provisional government formed, composed of Vecthari, who understood that their species' only hope lay in accepting human terms. Admiral Hayes watched the revolution unfold through sensor data and intercepted communications. He felt no joy, only exhaustion. The war was ending, but the cost had been enormous on both sides. "They are requesting terms," his communications officer reported. Hayes nodded slowly. "Tell them we accept their surrender. The Queen Mothers responsible for Millbrook will face trial for crimes against sapient life. The Vecthari will be disarmed and demilitarized for 100 years. A joint human-Relari commission will oversee the transition." He paused, then added, and tell them we will help rebuild what we destroyed. We are not monsters. We just had to prove we could be, if necessary. The surrender was formalized 3 days later. Human troops landed on Vecthar Prime, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. The Queen Mothers were taken into custody. Evidence of their crimes was gathered for the trial that would follow. 6 months later, the rescued children returned to New Haven for a memorial service. The 47 who had died were honored with a monument in the rebuilt town of Millbrook. Their names were carved in stone that would stand forever. Dr. Nathan Cole stood in the crowd, watching the ceremony. Captain Laura Bennett was there too, her hair now completely gray from the stress of war. Sergeant Kevin Brooks attended with his team, their wounds healed but the memories still fresh. And then something unexpected happened. Sophie, the 5-year-old girl who had not spoken since her rescue, walked forward to the memorial. She placed a small flower at its base. Then she turned to face the crowd, her voice small but clear. "They kept us in the dark," she said. "We thought no one was coming." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she continued. "Then the soldiers came. They had lights. They said we were going home." She looked up at the sky, blue and peaceful above the rebuilt settlement. "Thank you for coming to get us." The crowd stood in silence. Hardened soldiers wept openly. Parents held their children close. In that moment, everyone understood why they had fought. Not for revenge, not for conquest, for those children who had waited in the darkness, hoping someone would save them. On the distant world of Fessin Prime, the Relari observer completed his final record of the human Vecthari War. His species had watched the galaxy for millions of years. They had seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct. But this conflict had taught them something new. "Let this stand as testimony to future civilizations," he wrote. "Humanity is not merely another species among thousands. They are something we had forgotten could exist. A people who will burn worlds for their children, yet show mercy when the fighting ends. A species that channels rage into justice rather than annihilation." He paused, considering his final words carefully. "The galaxy has many predators, many conquerors, many warriors, but humanity is different. They do not seek war. They seek only to protect what they love. And when that love is threatened, they become something that even we, the ancient watchers, must respect." He saved the record and sealed it for future generations. Let this serve as warning to all who would harm the innocent. The humans remember every wound. They forgive nothing that touches their young. Challenge them if you dare, but know the price. His final line would be quoted throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. They are not prey. They never were. The war was over, and the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Some lines should never be crossed. Some species should never be tested. Humanity was both.